Thank you, Chairwoman Titus. I want to welcome GSA Administrator Emily Murphy and thank you for joining us today. GSA has accomplished a lot in recent years across its portfolio. GSA saved federal agencies $7 billion in just fiscal year 2019 alone. The DOT headquarters purchase will realize significant savings over the long term. And GSA was part of the team to help stand up the Public Building Reform Board pursuant to the FASTA Act, which will realize billions of dollars in savings in the sales of unneeded federal property. But once again, instead of focusing on critical issues like those I mentioned or our crumbling infrastructure, we are here today focusing on bashing the president. We have other business before this subcommittee that is critical to the American taxpayer, including issues that fall under the purview of the GSA administrator. For instance, Ranking Member Meadows and I introduced legislation that would give GSA some of the tools needed to address the avalanche of expiring leases. We spend over $5 billion a year on leasing space. We should be focused on what we can do to ensure these leases are replaced with good deals and continue to reduce costs. We also have bills pending before this subcommittee to pilot the use of public-private partnerships to help address a backlog of GSA projects. We should be focused on solutions to address a backlog of GSA capital projects so we are not forced to resort to leasing because we cannot afford to do anything else. The Federal Protective Service is responsible for securing GSA's facilities. There is a reorganization happening right now involving FPS. But instead of focusing on how this reorganization may be impacting the security of people working and visiting federal buildings, we are holding our second hearing related to the old post office. Office of Management and Budget just approved the first round of high-value properties to be sold under historic and bipartisan legislation this committee drafted, the Federal Asset Sale and Transfer Act. But instead of focusing on that, we are questioning a project that turned a money-losing asset into a money-making asset for taxpayers, which was, I think that's about $9 million a year in savings. GSA, along with other agencies, had facilities damaged in many of the disasters that happened across the country in recent years. Where are they in fixing and repairing them? Why is that not a focus today? And instead of ensuring all GSA employees are focused on these and other critical issues, many of the GSA employees have had to spend their time responding to the majority's document requests, which can best be described as a partisan fishing expedition. Let's be clear, GSA has produced over 10,000 pages of documents in response to Democratic requests, over 30,000 if you include the FBI headquarters project document requests. Despite GSA providing rolling document productions following our hearing in September, the chair felt compelled to issue a subpoena. In response, GSA offered this committee an opportunity to go to the GSA and review the financial records submitted for the old post office for oversight purposes. This committee has had a long-standing bipartisan respect for the sensitivity of certain information, such as procurement-sensitive and proprietary business information. We know this information, if disseminated, can harm the interests of the taxpayer as it would result in lower competition and increased costs because of the higher risk of doing business with the government. I agree you have to be able to conduct our oversight, and as I stated earlier, GSA has invited this committee to view the financial records for this purpose. But the majority would not take up GSA on this offer because the committee would not agree to one simple term: to not publicly disclose any of the private financial information attained in this document. This only confirms what we already know. This is not a legitimate exercise of the committee's oversight authority, but rather an abuse of that authority to harm the president politically. We spent our December hearing listening to witnesses argue that the current arrangement at the OPO violates the Emoluments Clause, and now that there are reports a hotel interest may be sold, that too, according to Democrats, violates the Constitution, even before it's happened. Outleasing historically has not only been supported by Congress, but encouraged. The Public Building Cooperative Use Act of 1976 and Section 111 of the National Historic Preservation Act were intended to encourage commercial, cultural, recreational, and other activities in federal buildings. The OPO lease itself was directed by Congress in legislation. Are there valid issues we may want to examine with respect to outleases going forward? Of course. There are many other issues we should be addressing here today. I hope today we can not only look at outleasing going forward, but other critical issues related to public buildings. I yield back the balance of my time.